We are podcastvideos.com. Our goal is to educate, enlighten, engage, and entertain. We believe in the power of love and transformation through storytelling.
Welcome back. This is another episode of Story Scaling from the crew at podcastvideos.com. I'm Dan, and there's Sam Parker in today. We're going to talk about what we've been calling our white paper, which is kind of an ugly industry term. You may know it as our comprehensive how-to guide for show development.
Much prettier sounding than a white paper.
Yes.
Much more engaging.
What we call it here, and then what we release it to the wild as is two different things. But we put it out a couple of weeks ago. We've had some interest in it, and this is everything you should think about before you go in and hit record.
Or maybe even if you've started and you're completely lost and you're like, I did something wrong.
That could apply to more than a few podcasters out there these days.
Yes.
It's not necessarily Mike's choice how to set up the studio. We'll have another comprehensive how-to guide because we're not going to say white paper to the public anymore. Covering some of the recording and setting up your space, picking your equipment, your software, all that. But this is how you define what your show is going to be, who your audience is. We've seen clients struggle with this. We've seen other folks who probably should be clients struggle with this, and some of them just muddle their way through. Others quit. The whole idea of show development, and let's talk a little bit about this. Parker, you developed the studio itself, but you helped some of our earliest clients kind of get their shows on the rails. What were they struggling with?
Well, I mean, early on, a lot of it was this whole new kind of world for a lot of these people. And we still have that continually for a lot of our clients. But, we've had more and more people as of late since we've been out, and people were more forward-facing, people that are actually coming in and saying, I've got a show, or I've started working on a show, and, what are some things that I need to keep in mind? I actually had a conversation with a potential client yesterday who actually had gotten on and downloaded the white paper and read through it and was like, there's a lot of things on here that I didn't even think about.
Sweet. There's another download.
Right, exactly. So, it's kind of one of those things of, what we're trying to do is help people strategize and work through what it takes to get into podcasting, because there's this common misconception that I can be a Rogan and I'm going to make $100 million right out of the bat kind of thing. And what a lot of people didn't realize is thousands of episodes in before you really reach that point. And so
some of his early episodes, if you go back and look at his first 20 to 30 episodes, they look terrible compared to the production that's done today. Now, some of that is experience.
Yeah.
Some of that is pre-planning. Some of it is having a real nice backing.
But it's just, it's helping people that want to get into the space be prepared for it, essentially, whether it be through us or on their own. So it's just kind of a interesting learning curve that a lot of people always have heard about it. They know podcasting, they want to get into it. What people don't really kind of realize is the work and dedication and time that it does take if you really want to make it successful. So, really just shedding some light on, okay, here's a little bit of what it takes. Like, these are the early stages of it. It's not getting into, like you mentioned, the actual recording itself and setups and things like that. But how do I prep for it? Because what I've seen in our experience here is there's very few people that can essentially just kind of walk in and wing it to a degree. So
there's plenty who think they can.
There's plenty that think they can.
Yes.
And they may be able to in real time, but as the show continues to build and develop over time, what we realize going back and kind of watching is without kind of a structure and a plan in place, you start to repeat yourself a lot without really knowing it.
It's a strategic rather than a tactical approach.
Yes, absolutely.
So we've also seen that people will come in and say, oh my gosh, you need to do all this before you record. That's a lot of front-end work, and they get a little surprised.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen that Cy Kirby, Blue Collar Business Podcast, we did a lot of front-end work for him, and it launched much smoother. Where something like Big Talk About Small Business, we had to go in and try to jam this into it after they'd started recording. Well, they're already out, and it's front-loaded, but it makes the rest of the operation so much smoother.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
For
yeah,
sure.
and it's just like when you establish any brand, right? Whether it's just a show for fun or if you're trying to be the next Joe Rogan, like you want to make sure it's consistent throughout, and you want to make sure it's consistent for a listener.
And you have to make some decisions up front, like what are my distribution channels? How am I going to host this? Do I use video?
And not saying you can't change that midway through, you know, to Big Talk's point, like we kind of restructured their show a year in, but it does make it a lot more difficult. So
I like that. That's generous of her to say restructured. We just put some structure to it.
that's true. There
It's hard
was
to
no
restructure
structure.
something that doesn't exist. But the person I was talking to yesterday, it's like we've recorded 6 episodes. And then once they came across that, because they actually had done some episodes on their own, they were in town, came in and recorded here. And they were just like, I didn't realize it was this deep, you know? And so people just think, I just need my topic that I want to talk about and then maybe some guests and let's just jump into it type of thing. And you can do that, but that's the reason why there are millions of podcasts that have been created with sub 6 episodes, because people put this work in, they start pushing it out, they're getting 2 or 3 listens, and it's like, well, this isn't going anywhere.
Right.
So it's the lack of that preparation on the front end and thinking through the things that people just genuinely at this point in time still don't really know about is how to make it successful.
Right. Now, there are other factors, obviously. You know, you are not going to come in, record 6 episodes, and, you know, receive a $100 million check.
Yeah.
What?
If, sorry, Sam. Bubble burst.
Yes.
But there's still plenty of work to do, not only in setting up your recording space, your studio, if you're going to use it. Then there's the other thing people don't think about, which is the back end of it. You've got to get it up, you've got to get it out, and then you have to promote it. But we're going to put out some how-to guides on all of those things, too.
I love it.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
And that's,
Merry Christmas, like next year.
which is not that far away.
Yeah,
A few
hey.
weeks.
I have a show development plan for the guides.
There you go.
I'm still just on the very first part of it.
Yes.
Because, again, it's a little front-loaded.
Some progress.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm doing a case study right now around a show that's existed for a couple of years. But it's to kind of add to your point of the back end, like focusing on that. You know, the front end stuff is very crucially important to set that entry for success. But obviously the type of content you're talking about, that kind of stuff makes a big difference. Some guests are going to be more successful than others. Some topics are going to resonate more than others. But the reach is kind of the main thing, to me at least, when it starts coming to, okay, we've done the prep work. It's vitally important. You're recording, that's great too, but where it goes and how it's pushed is more paramount than people realize.
Sure.
And as I'm starting to dive into this case study for a show that already has something going, and I start looking at, okay, how are they trying to grow it? And I start looking at social accounts that it's associated with and different things like that. It's like, you know, they've had an entire year of recordings. They release twice a month. It's been going on for an entire year on their main parent company's page. They have 4 posts for the entire year that talk about, we have a podcast. And it's like, oh, I mean, you know, and it's something, and it's a particular...
Go ahead and say they haven't gotten their $100 million check yet.
Exactly. You know, and it's one of those things where their whole goal of the company itself is education around what they do and the reasonings of what they do. And it's like, you know, a picture of X is great, but your whole point and your whole target with your audience is to help educate them on this is why these particular things are important. And you may be having some conversations on that, but nobody knows it because it's not being pushed the right way. And so, you know, in their particular case, education, a picture of this talking about with a brief description may hit a little bit with some people, but it's not going to really tell me a whole lot. And I'm probably not going to click the link to dig deeper. But if I can hear a 30 to 50 second segment across social media, you know, be that one channel, then I'm actually learning about what they're trying to push, and I'm going to go investigate and learn more. So
Now, part of what we do with show development is identifying which social media channels will
yes,
give you the best reach.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
for doing business in Bentonville or Matt Waller podcast,
Yeah.
those were heavily LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah. Who's your audience?
TikTok and Instagram weren't doing much for them.
Yeah.
For other shows, it's completely the opposite.
I
Absolutely.
don't know how many people are looking for supply chain on TikTok. Maybe
Yeah.
a lot. Maybe we just haven't discovered it yet, but
Until there's, a band named Supply Chain.
Right. Yep. It's not a bad.
But of course, we're going to have guides on all of this as well. Obviously, it's a waterfall effect.
Yeah.
We'll talk about social media outlets, which is a back end thing. in show development, because that way you know where you're building to. So you can come to the website, get the show development PDF downloaded. It's a comprehensive how-to guide, whether you're audio, video, or both. And come back soon to check out the next one, which will talk about the recording process itself.
Yep.
Eventually, we'll have a whole series of them for you, walking you from the beginning to you becoming Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And when you get your $100 million check, be sure to give some of it to us for downloading the white paper guide.
It is free, by the way.
Yeah.
It is free. Guys, we appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Check out our comprehensive how-to guide on show development at our website, which is, of course, podcastvideos.com.